Welcome to another weekly featured business brought to you by Visibility Impact and your host, James Moffat, where he will gracefully take our featured guest on a personal and business journey and stories that will inspire, educate, and engage you.
Hello and welcome to another Friday Featured Business brought to you by Visibility Impact and your host, myself, James Moffat. Today we have our 121st guest and we're doing something slightly different. So, 𝗕𝗘𝗔𝗥𝗡, welcome to the show.
Great to be with you. Good to see you again and looking forward to this conversation today. Excellent.
So, anyone that wants to know about Pete, we did a recording. Pete was actually our 12th guest. 12 featured business guests, so actually 2 years ago now. And yeah, Pete has a fantastic story to share, and he has shared it, and it is available on our YouTube channel. So we'll make that link available so people can catch up. We're not going to go through that again because we already know Pete. And if you don't know him already, then you can catch up on the previous recording and find out all about Pete and who he is and what he does. But for today's show, we're going to take Pete, or he's going to take us actually, on a journey about his holiday or his vacation, depending on where you are. So I know, Pete, you say vacation in the US, we say holiday typically in Europe, but whether it was a vacation type holiday or whether it was something more meaningful, we're yet to know. So Pete, you went on a trip to somewhere and in Asia that you're going to share with us. So yeah, in your words, Pete, tell us where you went, when you went, and let's get the story going.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely wouldn't call it a holiday or a vacation, but absolutely a worthwhile trip. March 1st through the 11th, I went to Nepal with a group of 8 men, so myself and 7 others, with the opportunity to engage with a group called 𝗟𝗘𝗔𝗥𝗡 International. The trip was sponsored by my church here in the United States called North Point Community Church. And my particular part of that church is a group called Bucket Church, but all of the members were from different communities within North Point, and they have a partnership with 𝗟𝗘𝗔𝗥𝗡 International to support them. I think the partnership's probably been going on for about 5 years now, maybe a little bit longer, in fact. And the intent was for us to learn, to share a little bit about how we as men in the United States basically act and to represent what men should be like for those individuals over in Nepal, because 𝗟𝗘𝗔𝗥𝗡 International is a group that helps fight human trafficking.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to ask some questions as we go through this, and we have an audience as well. And Linda, welcome.
Hi.
Linda.
Hello. Oh, can I say something?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Hi. I'm here. I'm the audience. I'm sorry I'm late, but I found this to be really, really interesting. I admire that work.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Glad you're here.
So needed. Incredible. What I already read really touched my heart, and I think. It's so needed. It's just so needed.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sorry, Linda, carry on.
No, I'm just looking forward to hearing everything.
Okay, looking forward to sharing.
Thanks.
Right. So I'm going to ask questions. Linda, also feel free to jump in and ask questions as we go, because we want this also to be interactive, and also for anyone listening in the audience, as we're going to share this, that they can connect and they can understand some of the questions that maybe we asked that they'd wanted to ask as well. So Pete, let's learn a little bit more about this. Why particularly in Nepal? How did that come up? And And particularly, like you mentioned about the daughters and the human trafficking there, particularly with the women, right? And you mentioned this came from kind of a church group that you belong to. So was this one of many kind of missions, should I say? I don't know if mission is the right word.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good word. For me personally, this has been my fourth mission trip through my church. There's mission trips that go on that are organized individually and collectively with organizations. I haven't done any of those, but I have done 4 with North Point Community Church. And the reason that I feel really good about that is they are very purposeful in their selection process. So what do I mean by that? Our church is like, let's go find individual organizations that are doing great work that we believe in and that we can get behind, and let's pour resources into them versus saying, oh, well, we'll just send a group of folks off to pick a country, Cambodia or Chile or, for example, Africa, Kenya. Instead, they're like, okay, let's find these partnerships that are doing the work that the church believes in, that is making a difference, it's changing hearts. Obviously, and I'll share that it's a Christian-based church, so this is an important part of it for me personally. But my first 2 trips that I went on were in 2015 and 2016. They were to Jericho in the West Bank. They call it the Holy Lands trip. So there was those were, interestingly enough, there were medical mission trips. I don't have a medical background, but they needed folks that could do other things. And so I supported a team of doctors and nurses and nurse practitioners and physician's assistants and even pharmacists, supporting a group in, as I mentioned, Jericho. It's called Seeds of Hope. And that group was there to help individuals who needed medical attention, and then to support a school that has been established there for, I guess around 20 years. That is a part of the community and doing great work in that community. The last trip before this one I just took to Nepal was to Northwest Kenya. And that church, that organization was formed. Basically, our intent was to go and represent to the men there. Hey, men in the United States have very similar problems and challenges, so we could empathize with them and we could collaborate with them, and they could feel a part of a bigger community than just individuals who are challenged in a small rural village in Kenya. And so it was really meaningful work, and I got to be amongst all these individuals, and really it touched my heart in many ways because I got to see a community of men and women and young boys and girls, and then we were focusing on helping the men understand what it's like to walk the walk that we have in the United States. And then, as I said, most recently, this was formed. I learned about it actually probably last September. I've always had this burning desire to go to Nepal. From my background before, that I flew in the United States Navy and had spent a lot of time internationally. I flew in the Pacific and Indian Oceans. And so the idea of Nepal to me was always a mystery. And in fact, I mentioned that I watched the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark, and there's a scene there in Kathmandu. And so there was a lore about it. And so I got to be honest and say, listen, this was captivating from that perspective. But then as I learned about the mission and Our Daughters International and what they were doing, I was all in. I definitely felt like this was right for me.
Excellent. So I might jump around a bit with some of the questions because I'm curious and I'm thinking of them as I go along. So you mentioned, you've been on previous ones. So when they come about, are these an annual thing or as and when, and who picks kind of the places that you go?
Right. So these are organized continuously. It's a large church, so there's lots of opportunities. Probably at any one point in time, you could go on. There's a special section of the website and see 5 or 6 trips, and they could be to Central America or Southeast Asia or South America or Africa. And so it's a kind of a combination of, hey, look, see what's available, see what touches your heart, and then fill out an application. The thing that I really love about it is it's very rigorous. So you have to be serious about wanting to go. There's a lot of detail that's requested, everything from passport information to maybe immunization. And then there's typically, there's always a financial component. There's like, okay, this trip is going to cost X amount of money. You're responsible for it. And then they help you to raise money for it. But ultimately, if you want to go and you haven't raised it, then you have to decide to put the money up. And it's never judgmental. It's like, okay, if you cannot afford to go, if you haven't raised the money and you're not in a position to raise the money, then maybe this isn't a good time for you to go. And it's never about judgment. It's about, hey, look, there's requirements that have to be met. So I knew about that. In this particular case, this trip cost $3,600 to go. So not insignificant. But in every instance that I've done this, I've had the folks who know me that I've reached out to, some who don't know me, but are moved by my story and what's going on, put their hand up and participate. So I raised all the money for this trip, which was fantastic.
Oh, excellent. And but you said the church also helps you, with the kind of
with the organization, like how should the letter be written? Who should you reach out to? The thing that's fascinating about it to me is some of the people that you think will be supportive, for whatever reason, don't choose to help you or to assist, but others that you don't really know at all, they're like, hey, I'm moved by what you're doing and I want to participate. And for me, I never worry about it. It's like, I know God's going to find a way to get the money so that I can go. And part of the reason why I go this route as opposed to paying myself the whole way is because I want others to feel like they're participating with me. And many, many people cannot go. And I understand that. I'm fortunate that because of my business, I can go. And so I want to be arms and legs there and help these organizations and allow folks who have the passion but can't go to come alongside me and feel really vested in this. And so one of the things I did was, as a way of saying thank you, is I brought back something that had been handmade by the daughters at this organization, and it was a small piece of cloth called a 𝗙𝗘, K-H-A-D-A, which means welcome. This is what we were given when we arrived. And so it was hand woven, and I provided that with a letter saying, I'm so glad you came alongside me. Here's what I did. And a lot of what was posted in my LinkedIn profile and post recently was shared in that letter. And then, of course, a very heartfelt thank you for helping me make this possible.
Absolutely. So, yeah, you mentioned earlier, I think you mentioned eight people that went. Right.
Correct.
So these were 8 men from the church, or
correct.
It being men and women, or it was specifically for men this time?
Yeah, it can be either or both. In this particular case, it was just men. So, and the idea, the reason behind that was because of the purpose of the organization. So this is about human trafficking. It's about young women who are captured and then rescued and then are being rehabilitated and trained. And so the intent of the founder, a gentleman named Ramesh, was I want men to come so that these daughters, he calls each one of them daughters, I love that connection, could see what men look like who love the Lord, and also be able to see that in this particular case, Western men, American men, what they are like, because in my imagination, maybe they've confronted some that have given them a much different experience, and so we could hopefully shed some light on what it really means to be a man.
Well, excellent. So I want to get to the story now. So But you've mentioned that you've been on previous ones before. Had you been with the same group of people before, or any of the same?
No, that's one of the beautiful things about this, is the growth that you get with the people that you go with. So in the first two instances, I went, as I mentioned, to the West Bank, to Jericho. They call it a Holy Lands trip, and it was men and women. And as I mentioned, it was a medical mission trip. So it was probably half men, half women. And I would say there was a group probably of 14 or 15, and probably 3 of us were non-medical background. But, you typically sign up 6 to 7 months beforehand, and you start meeting with these individuals and getting to know them and forming relationships with them. And so you're building bonds with them. In this particular case, in the last 2 trips, it was for men only. And I like the purpose, and I've lead my own men's group, so I'm focused more recently on just the support for men, and so that's why I enjoyed that part of it. And then again, the reason that they wanted men was to represent to these daughters what men who have a certain walk behave like.
Does it help that you have your own daughters?
Oh, for sure. I mean, that was a huge motivator for me, as I mentioned, because there's an application process. I said in the application, part of the reason this is so motivating to me is I'm the father of twin daughters. I'm the brother of 4 sisters. Of course, my mom's no longer alive, but a son. And a husband. So for me, women are really important in my life. I've worked with a number of women over my career, and just value women in an incredible way. I think they contribute so much to our world, and oftentimes are not recognized for that. And in many ways, if they're allowed, can complement and enhance what I do. So if you go on my website, you'll see that I'm working with 2 women right now, Stephanie Ellis and Caitlin McDonald. So for me, it was just a natural, it touched my heart. I was like, absolutely, I've got to raise my hand now, whether they choose me or not. That's their decision, but the motivation for why I'm doing this is real.
Excellent. So we're going to get into
I should mention also, I have 2 daughters-in-law, which are also important to me. So, I'm just surrounded by amazing women.
Aren't we all? Yeah. So I want to get to the story, but before you get going, obviously this is like an itinerary. I mean, you know where you're going, who you're meeting, and kind of the activities per day, I guess.
Yeah, and it's a good way to finish it with, I guess. We were kind of given overall structure on this particular trip, but we weren't given a lot of detail. And in the past, that would have been troublesome to me. But as I've gotten older, it's become less and less. I remember when I first, joined the Navy, I had a meeting. I was a young ensign joining my squadron, and my executive officer, that's the number 2 person in the squadron, I had a meeting with me. And, the first thing he said is, Canalichio, you got to learn what it means to have flexibility, or to be flexible. Because we will prepare for many, many things, and last minute they will change. And so for us on this particular trip, they wanted us to experience things as in a way that was kind of learn as you go. And so there was some structure. We knew we would be flying into Kathmandu. We knew we were going to be moving to the western central part of the country and doing some trekking through some of the inland mountain ranges. But we really didn't understand why we were doing that. But then we knew afterwards we would be meeting the organization. And so we kind of started with that. And I said, okay, clearly there's a purpose for why we're doing this. We'll kind of find out as we go, and it'll reveal itself when it's supposed to.
Excellent. I say excellent a lot because it is excellent. So we're going to get into the story, and you fly in there and who you met and how this happened. But was there any kind of prerequisite in the way that if you went, you had to come back and write the story? and you had to take photos and share the photos as well.
Yeah, a great question. I wouldn't call it a prerequisite, but certainly highly encouraged, both by the organization, the church, and the group's called 𝗙𝗘𝗔𝗥𝗘, GLOBAL, and then parentheses X, close parentheses. And so they highly encourage that we do that. But I also wanted to absolutely do that. I wanted to document it for myself, but especially for those that were coming alongside me. And I should mention also, I'm saying, hey, listen, I'm going on this trip. I need to raise money. But believe me, I understand circumstances are difficult. And so if that's not possible for you, 100% understand. But please pray for me, pray for our trip, pray for the men who are going, pray for our church and for the organization and the founder and everyone that's supporting them, because I am a huge believer in prayer. And so for me, that was important. So for me, going back, writing the letter, and by the way, there was trekking involved. So I had to get a tent, I had to get a sleeping bag, I had to get a backpack, I had to get all these things, and I did not have them. And if you want to do it right, you can incur several thousands of dollars in equipping yourself. But I had some really amazing men that are friends of mine, part of a group that I participate here in the United States called Men's Fraternity, which is in Atlanta, Georgia. And they raised their hand and they gave me that. We even had a small notebook called Write in the Rain, where this gentleman, Colonel James Harper, has modified it to have some scripture in the front of it. And I got enough of those I could hand one out to each member of the group and to a few of the men that we met in Nepal. And so while we were walking along this path, or at night after when we were in our tents, we could make notes, and there was scripture there to help support us. So for those reasons, I wanted to document what I've done. And I love that you're giving me this opportunity to document it in a video so people can see me and hear my voice and feel the emotion that's connected with the story.
So I'm going to try not to keep saying excellent, right? But did you video as well?
I didn't personally, but we had a photographer/videographer that was assigned to us on the trip. A young Nepalese man who was really quite good bilingual, spoke fairly good English. And so he was documenting all the way for their purposes. And we have been told that we're going to get access to the video and to into the photographs. And I can't wait to see them, because first off, he'll have taken shots that I didn't have a clue that he was doing, but the quality will be really high. But in addition to that, the other men who went on the trip, we all had our phones and we were all taking shots. So we're sharing those videos and those photographs, and it's just really creating a beautiful collage of different stories that we each had individually as well as collectively.
Yeah. So I guess when you came back, I mean, the church would want to know, particularly for others, could you share the story? So you'd share the story to them and maybe bring up pictures and a slideshow and whatever, talk about who you met, what you did and everything else.
Yeah, for sure. And as I mentioned, for me personally, as part of the work I do, for my company, I believe in this idea that we should, as individuals, as brand owners, we should share all of our story. That's an important part of who we are and what we do. And so the idea that we would, that I would, and others I encourage would tell their story, their personal story as part of their brand strategy is fundamental. So I wrote this story that I posted on LinkedIn, last week, and I'm excited that I think more than 3,500 individuals have seen it. And in there, it was somebody who worked within my church, within the group called 𝗙𝗘𝗔𝗥𝗘, not only liked the story, but wrote a note and said, really glad that you shared this with your community so that the message is getting out.
No, exactly. I mean, I read it on LinkedIn, but I get your newsletter. So I saw it there. I didn't want to read too much, because I didn't want to kind of preempt kind of this and know too much, because I want the excitement of you telling me. And so I know we've got Paul that's just joined as well. So,
Hey, Paul.
Hi, Jim. Hi, Pete.
Great to see you.
Same here.
Yeah, it's been a while, Paul. So, I mean, I guess you'll resonate a lot with this story as well. And feel free to jump in and ask any questions as well. Likewise, Linda. So let's get to the story. So these 8 guys, did you all go together or did you go different places? Right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, that was really an important part of it. I mean, and I got to tell you, I not wanting to act on it, but there were certainly parts of me that said, oh, wow, going to Nepal, that's something that probably will never do again. So wouldn't it be interesting to take advantage and, jump off after the trip's over and, go over to Mount Everest or, some of these other places. And if you're going on a holiday, as we talked about in the beginning, that would be completely reasonable. But, that's not what the purpose was. The purpose was to form a team, go over as a team, and come back as a team, and to grow as a team along the way. So we would meet with our hosts at our Daughters International, whomever we were assigned to on that particular day for whatever particular activity. But then in the evening, we would have dinner together and we would discuss what happened, and we would go through our own personal stories or share particular things that meant something significant to us. And so these were very long days. They were early morning rises and typically late in the evening before we, put our heads down.
Yeah. So there's a lot of bonding, getting to know kind of the 8 of you.
100%.
And then going together, spending kind of 24 hours a day with each other. Right. And then seeing what the value is. I mean, everybody has like certain traits and gifts and things that, as in qualities that they can share, and then to bring those out in the journey. So, right. So these, I'm thinking kind of Navy SEAL stuff now, like, because you used to be in the Navy. So you've got these 8 guys that have met at the airport, and I guess like wish their blessings from their family, good luck and everything. And then off you go together. Right.
Yeah, so exactly.
In my mind, and then where did you fly from and to?
Right. Good question. So we flew out of Atlanta, flew on Qatar Airlines, flew to Doha, and then connected in Doha, which is in Qatar, to Kathmandu in Nepal. The trip was probably door to door, going over about 26 hours and then coming back maybe closer to 30. The reason for that extra 4 hours or so was we had a longer connection in Doha going back. And also the trade winds, typically where we were flying, go from west to east. So we were dealing with a headwind coming back and we had a tailwind going there. So that makes a difference when you're flying, I don't know how many miles, probably 7,000 miles, something like that. It was 10 hours and 45-minute difference from our time zone, the eastern part of the United States, to Nepal. I knew that India was typically 10.5 hours during standard time and 9.5 during daylight savings. But I didn't realize that Nepal was actually 15 minutes later than India. So that made it really quite interesting. And Paul, you probably know that, but I didn't. So I was like looking at the clocks on the wall in our hotel, and it's like, okay, there's 10.5. And now in Nepal, it's 10 hours and 45 minutes, different than our time at home back in Atlanta.
That must be quite confusing, having to add 15 minutes on.
I just rounded up to 11 and said, okay, we're about 11 hours. And so, okay, if it's 12 o'clock here, it's 12 a.m. minus 1 more hour. So it's 11 p.m. back in Atlanta, Georgia.
Right.
Give or take.
So, I mean, it reminds me of the movie Trains, Planes and Automobiles, right? So you got, I mean, how many different methods of transport did you use?
Yeah, so great question. simple, easy. My wife brought me to the airport, so that was an easy commute. We had to show up. I think we showed up like 3.5 or 4 hours earlier than our flight. Normally, international flight, I would give 2.5 hours, but we needed every minute of that. We had a big group. We had a lot of bags. It turned out that there was a lot of people going on this particular flight from Atlanta to Qatar. So painstakingly long in going through the line. So getting our bags checked and everything. And so by the time we got through, checking in and security and all of that, we really didn't have a whole lot of time before we got on our plane. And then the connection in Doha, and we asked this ahead of time, I think it was like 50 minutes, not even quite an hour. And we said, that seems awfully close. And they were like, oh, no, we do this all the time. It's fine. Well, it turned out we were 20 minutes late arriving in Doha. But fortunately, Qatar was like, hey, we know you're coming. We know there's a group of you. We're holding the plane. And we basically had to jog through a very large airport, go through customs. Even though we were connecting, we still had to get screened. And that took at least 30 or 40 minutes, if not longer. And so by the time we got on the plane, we were the last individuals. And we'd already gone close to 12 hours, and we had another 4.5 hours to go in flying. So it was quite a lengthy day, and we landed, I think, something like midnight Nepal time. So of course our body clocks had no idea exactly what time it was.
Did the other passengers cheer when you arrived on the plane because they were waiting for you? So if they announced from the cockpit that we've got 8 special guests coming that are here on a kind of a mission, then when you arrive, they could clap, right? And if they didn't, I think they would like boo because you've held them up like for 30 minutes or whatever it was.
Yeah, that did not happen. I've had that happen before where I've been one of those who've cheered somebody who finally got on the plane, and especially when there was a purpose intent of that flight. But I imagine there might have been a few others that were stragglers that made us kind of not feel like we were the only ones keeping the plane from taking off.
Right. So you never lost any baggage on the way there and back?
No, we didn't. Definitely, that was a huge concern, especially because we were supposed to be backpacking. But thankfully, all the bags came through. Now, I will tell you, on the back end, we had been flying for, like I said, 26 or 27 hours, and we're really ready to get home, and got through customs fairly quickly, but waited, I don't know, an hour and a half for our bags to come off the conveyor belt. So we had family members who hadn't seen us in close to 2 weeks who were sitting outside waiting. So I don't know what happened with the airline and why it was so slow, but that made for a longer flight. So usually that's the only time that matters, that the bags would come through, but thankfully they did. And of course, on the other way over, had we lost something, we would have just managed with somebody sharing a sleeping bag or a tent or something. But fortunately, that didn't happen.
You don't want to share a sleeping bag with a...
I mean, like maybe an extra, or like lay it out as a blanket. Who knows?
Okay, yeah. Anyway, logistics out the way. I want to know about the story now. So you've arrived there, right? You arrived in the night or in the day? You went to bed first, or you went straight into action, kind of thing?
No, great question. We didn't. We got there about midnight, and our host, the founder, met us, and so we grabbed all our bags, and like I said, there was a significant number. Looked for carts. It kind of Kathmandu basically appeared like I thought it would, definitely. It was a large international airport, but definitely had the feel of a third world country, in the sense that it wasn't as organized as some of the airports that I've seen. Certainly very different than the one we saw in Doha, for example. But we carried our bags and made our way along, and ultimately ended up. They had a large van, which was well made and new and could fit all of us, and we loaded all our stuff on it. And we had about a half an hour, 45-minute ride to our airport, to our hotel. So we got to the hotel about 1:30 in the morning, something like that, checked in, and they said, get some rest and we'll see you in about 7 hours. And so around 8 o'clock or so, 8:30, the next morning, Kathmandu time, we were all up. Of course, our body clocks were thinking it was the evening, but that was fine. We were so tired, and I've kind of gotten used to this kind of travel from my days flying in the Navy. So I don't have to take any melatonin. I don't take any medicine. I just, kind of push myself to the point where I'm able to sleep. And so the next day we hit the ground running with breakfast and a short internal team meeting. And then our host showed up and, met with them, and then got on the van again and started making our way.
Yeah, so it was pretty good then. At least you stayed in a hotel and had some. I'm picturing like you're getting your sleeping bags and your tents out. You're arriving at midnight trying to put a tent up.
Fortunately, the first night that did not happen.
So that was good. And I imagine like a whole bunch of tuk-tuks like picking you up from the airport, like, and seeing how many people you can get in one. And because, I've been to India, and my experience, I loved it. It's magical, but that's another story. But I'm sure there's some similarities there. But I did have a ride in a tuk-tuk, and that was great fun in the most busy city and trying to navigate through the traffic. But it works and it's fun.
Yeah. No, I'm just as a shortest diversion, been to Mumbai and been in one of those vehicles, and certainly smelled and tasted and sensed sensory overload. And there was a lot of that going on outside of our van, but fortunately they were mindful about this and said, look, we need to keep this group together. So how are we going to do that? And like the van had a big kind of crate on the top of it. So we loaded it up with, all kinds of stuff and strapped it down.
Yeah.
So
you're getting me thinking like it's the A team now. The A team has just arrived and put you in the van.
It was a bit. I was one of the. I'm close to 6 foot tall, and I was one of the smallest guys on the flight, on the trip.
Really?
Yeah, there was plenty of guys that were 2 and 3 and 4 inches taller than I was. So it was, and a lot younger. So very fit men.
Yeah, I would say that you're face man, aren't you?
How's that?
A team.
A team, yeah.
Anyway, right. So you've arrived, and the first. I mean, after you've got up, like a bit more refreshed and everything, where did you go to first?
Yeah, so we got up the next morning, got in everything, is moving at a speed that's quite a bit slower than I'm used to typically, and I expected that, right? But we got in the van and we drove for maybe a couple of hours west, and stopped at this like little side cafe, and had some traditional Nepalese lunch, kind of talked about where we were going to go. It was funny. I'm former Coca-Cola, and, of course, anywhere and everywhere in the world you can get a Coke. So that was kind of a nice way of connecting me with home. Had one of those at lunch. And then we had a short stint after that. And
just quickly, how was the weather?
The weather was amazing. Actually, I was prepared for it to be severely cold, but we were not that high. Like Nepal is got different altitudes, and so where we were was anywhere from 4,000 to 7,000 feet. So I don't know what that's about, 1,200 meters to maybe 2,000 meters, 2,500 meters. So not insignificant, but nothing like, the Himalayas, for example. So the weather, I'm going to say in Fahrenheit, I could probably convert to Celsius as well, but it was probably mid 70s during the day, which is really gorgeous, and low to mid 50s at night. So what's that? Maybe, somewhere between 5 and maybe 22 degrees, Celsius, something like that. So during the day, it was very comfortable. It was the dry season. It didn't rain at all, maybe a little bit of mist on a couple of days. But the weather was, as nice as it could be. So we were really fortunate that way.
Yeah, so good enough for camping.
Yeah, I mean, at night it was chilly, right? You had a tent and you had a sleeping bag, and definitely wanted the sleeping bag because 50 degrees over an extended period of time is not comfortable if you're not warm. But for what we were doing, it was no problem.
Okay, so let's get on to. I want to learn more about kind of the places that you went and how you got involved, like, with helping the girls, the women, and so on.
So I should mention. So we finished the lunch, a little stint. Next thing we knew, we were all getting in a raft. There was a place where we were going to stay that was along the water, this river, and it was a team bonding opportunity. And the host of our Daughters International and the 8 of us got in with a guide and went down this river for a couple of hours. And, it was just a fun period for us because we had met on and off maybe 6 or 7 times. We'd, been in an airport together, but we're still growing together. So getting side by side in a raft, rowing and having the water come into our raft, was a good bonding experience. And we end up at this, probably 2-star hotel, got in there, set up our stuff. And then by that time it was evening, we had kind of a campfire prayer evening. And then the next morning got up early and a stint up the mountain in a van, actually 2 trucks. And then they said, okay, you're off, and, go for it. And you're going to be on your own for the next 3 days, 2 days of camping in tents, and then we'll pick you up on the 3rd day.
Wow. So, I mean, first of all, you've traveled from the hotel like 2 hours in the van, then you've gone 2 hours up a river. I mean, this place is really pretty remote. Where you were going.
Yeah, it was remote. And that's a really excellent word, because what they wanted us to experience was, what is it like for these families and specifically these girls who live in these remote villages where there is no running water, there's no electricity, there's minimal access to anything, really. There's no, I mean, it's traditionally or predominantly farmland. Maybe there's some small little jobs, but it's a very impoverished area. And one of the things that I witnessed personally, the very first stint we had was going almost straight up from, vertical incline from, say, 4,000 to 7,000 feet. And we're huffing and puffing after a very short period of time because the grade is so steep and the altitude is high enough where the air is getting thinner. And once you get to the top, it's not like a flat plateau with a big spacious area. It's a very short little bit, and then it's down again. So we kind of saw some small schools at the top of these peaks. And, we were kind of saying, if you're playing with a ball or, any kind of thing like that, you better very well be careful, because if you don't throw it perfectly to the person who's going to receive it, it's going to fall down another 600 to 800 to 1,000 feet. So that's the kind of environment. And they wanted us to be in that environment so we would know exactly how arduous it was, from a geographical perspective, from lack of a business. And so just to feel the conditions, because that's the conditions that these families are living in. And then if you're a young daughter, sadly, there's a caste system in Nepal. And on top of that, men are the patriarchs. Males are considered superior to females. And so there's just really not much, a prospect for a young woman in that part of the world.
Yeah. So prior to going, did they say, oh, you have to be kind of physically fit in a way that there's a lot of, you have to carry your own bags, you have to paddle up a river for a couple of hours, go up and down mountains, the altitude, the air and everything. You have to be kind of prepared yourself for that.
They did. And I got to tell you, I was a little concerned. I'm pretty fit for my age, but I'm a little bit older. And So I was like, I'm hope I'm going to be okay with this.
Yeah, you're great for 45.
I wish a lot older than that. So yeah, I was concerned. I actually, in kind of a preparation for that, I had gone on a diet, because I was carrying a little bit extra weight and ended up losing about 15 pounds between January and February. So I figured if I lose that extra weight, that's that much less I have to carry around when I get to Nepal. And it definitely paid off, because it was not easy. It was steep up, and as hard as it was up, it was harder going down, just because of the gravity working on your on your joints, and the lack of stability in the footing.
Yeah. So now you've kind of made it. I mean, was the videographer guy there videoing you going up the river and other places?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. So that will be available, and I felt good when we went up the first hill, the very first one, which was very steep, and I wasn't the only one huffing and puffing, because I thought, okay, if these guys who are younger than me are feeling the same way, then I'm not going to be dragging them behind. And fortunately, that was the case. I kept up for the most part. I wasn't trying to be super macho, so there were occasions where I said, "Hey, can we take a 15-minute break just to catch my breath?" But for the most part, it wasn't terrible, and we dealt with sleeping at night in the tents, and
so the age of the guys going varied between, I mean, younger and older gentlemen, or
so. Late 20s, early 30s to, mid 60s.
So you're in the middle of that then. I mean, you're not weren't the oldest.
I probably was the oldest. I'll be 64 in May.
Wow. So congratulations anyway, keeping up with the young guys.
Yeah, thank you. I did feel very good about it. I was not as fit as they were, but they were not. I wasn't keeping them back, let's just say.
But they still thought you were a Navy SEAL, so they were a bit wary of you.
Far cry from a Navy SEAL, but thank you for the compliment.
So anyway, let's get to the village. So you've now arrived at the village. How big is the village? And did you check on the map, like before you went, how remote it was?
Honestly, I didn't check on the map, because I didn't know exactly where we were going, and that was part of the mystery and the revelation, like go experience. But where we stayed at night there was no village. It was just like a little area, and in the first evening, there were some families in and around that area. There was a building where we were next to, but we were kind of by ourselves. The second night, we were in there was a little school yard, and we were given that area in the schoolyard between buildings where we pitched our tents. So when we finished the second night of hiking and went down the mountain, we did enter a small town. And one of the things, we met up with our host again, who had dropped us and picked us up. And he said, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to meet one of the daughters who's graduated. They have different occupations they can get from the training we give them. They include learning how to cook fast food, Nepalese fast food, and owning their own food cart. So they're not only skilled in cooking, but they're skilled in owning a business, their own little food cart business. The second one was to become a seamstress and either work for a larger organization or a smaller organization. The third one was to become a stylist, a hairstylist, learn how to cut hair and have their own shop. And the fourth was to become an electrician, which I thought was amazing. He said most of the hairstylists in Nepal are actually from India. And so we're giving, and none of them are women. So we're giving them the chance to take a job that's typically held by a man, and typically a job that's not even held by someone who's from Nepal. So we're going to give them the chance to have that. And similarly with electricians. So the first place we went was to a small hair salon, and there was two women there, and my hair was about as short as it is now. So I had recently got my hair cut in preparation for this trip, but they said, who wants to get their hair cut? And I said, I'll get my hair cut. And I was like, hey, I'm going to support this woman.
So this is it, the haircut?
Yeah. No, it was a lot shorter than this. But that was fine.
But you haven't had it cut since?
I haven't had it cut since. Correct. It's been
sideways again. Let's have a look. Yeah, they did it. Yeah,
she did a great job, did she not?
Yeah.
I was very, very pleased. And by the way, we'd been hiking for 3 days, so I hadn't had the ability to shave. So I said after she was, and I'm thinking to myself, how can I reward this woman? How can I gift her? Because when we go on these trips, we're not supposed to just give money away. That's foundationally not a good thing to do. But if you're given a service, of course you can pay for that service. So I said, how can I gift her? So I said, can I pay a little bit more for the service? And, our leader said we could. So that was great. Then I said, okay, well, my hair's done. Does she know how to shave? And and she did. And so I got her to give me a shave as well, which I desperately needed. And so I gave her
with a cutthroat shaver.
She had a straight edge shaver. Yeah. And I've only had that done like 2 times in my life prior. I'm not used to having that done, but I thought this is a way for her to demonstrate her skill and her talents, and for me to compensate her for her services. And so on top of that, I was able to give her a little tip.
Your nose is still there.
How's that?
Your nose is still there. So
my nose is still here. Yeah. So she did a
pretty good job then.
She did an amazing job. And I was not the only one. 2 or 3 others got their hair cut on that day as well. So it was really excellent.
So the skills, you mentioned like several different types of trades. So who decides on the trades?
They do. That's the beauty of it. They can say, hey, and the other opportunity is to work in the organization, which is Our Daughters International. And it's predominantly the women who graduate from the program who go back in. There are some men involved, but very small number. So, and Ramesh is always looking for what are some more trades that we can help these women learn. And so he's really entrepreneurial in that respect and saying, okay, what can we teach them that will allow us to be sustainable in providing the right level of skill and that they can learn and be successful with. So it's really well thought through. I mentioned that they're, some of them are seamstress. So Ramesh's daughter, Allison, got her education in the States, and she's established this brand called Asha Wears. So that is a brand that is founded by Our Daughters International. And so they are not only creating clothes for these women, but they've created a brand that is recognizable, which I love. I'm holding up the tag from the garment, and the wording on it says, "Every garment has a story to tell. Ours is a story of hope and redemption. Our commitment to sustainability and our mission to empower survivors of human trafficking and those at risk makes this piece worth all the love you can give it. Making this piece of garment is a part of a woman's journey to freedom. Thank you for playing your part." And then there's a side note that says, "Someday when you feel like sharing the love, please donate or recycle me." So I love that they understand.
This is on the back of the card.
This is on the back of the card.
Wow.
Oh, and by the way, Asha, Aasha, means hope in Nepalese.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Yeah. So they have an Instagram account, and it's gorgeous. And so we had the opportunity also to go to their shop and support them by buying some clothes. And I brought some things back for Emily, and it was really, really fun.
Right. So I'm curious now about kind of the size of the village or the area that I don't know what you call it, the community where the girls are. I mean, how many are there? I mean, typically what ages, who's running it and kind of managing it for them? How do they get kind of international recognition? And how did you hear about them?
Okay, so I'll start with the last question. So our church, this Global X team, is got full-time members that are paid, that whose responsibility is to learn about these different organizations around the world, see if foundationally they're aligned, they're Christian organizations, and then to vet them and see what they're doing and how they're doing it. So they did that. I think I mentioned 5 or 6 years, but I think it actually may be longer than that. It might be closer to 8 or 10 years when the founder of Our Daughters International met with members of the Global X team. They went to see him, saw what he was doing. He started this organization 18 years ago, so maybe it had been going for 8 to 10 years, saw what they were doing, saw that it was foundationally aligned with what we were doing, and then we said, okay, how can we support this organization? And it's very much one of those where it's crawl before you walk before you run. So, baby steps initially. And so our group, I think, may be one of the first groups of 8 men who've actually gone and spent a week with them. They had smaller groups go in the past, and kind of like we're learning about each other. And, and truth be told, we want to go there with a purpose that is meaningful. So in our instance, he said, listen, I want you to experience what life is like for these young women, go live in their, spend time in their neighborhoods, and then understand how difficult it is. We actually met a small church while we were up in the mountains. And when I say small, it probably sat 20 people. So that's a pretty small church, right? Met the pastor, who was very charismatic. And so we got to engage with them. But to do that and then say, okay, what can we do while we're there? Well, what he wanted us to be was spiritual fathers. So he calls each one of these girls that they rescue a daughter. They're a daughter of, and that has purpose and meaning, that they're valued. And so we could be spiritual fathers. We were introduced as spiritual fathers so that they knew that they were in good hands with us, that we would, be loving to them and treat them with respect. And so the village that we came into, I don't know, if I had to guess, maybe 5,000 people. It was small. Maybe smaller than that. I really didn't get a great sense for it. But what we recognize is there are what they call 2 safe houses or dream houses. We went to one predominantly that held about 40 young girls. Those girls had been there for as short as 2 weeks before they had been rescued, and they could stay probably up to like 4 months. But there's no time frame. They go, they get the training they need, they get the rehabilitation they need, and when they're ready to move out, they move out. So I love that part of it, which was everyone's an individual. They're treated as individuals. They're respected for where they came from, what they've gone through, and there is no demand that they move through it at a speed that they're not ready for. So that was really, really cool. Again, I think they formally call it the safe house, but they affectionately call it the dream house. And so we got to meet these young ladies there over 2 days. And then the second day, we were able, after we established some rapport, to ask them what they dreamed about, what was their hopes and desires. And they had been told a little bit about the training. So some of them said, I want to be I want to own my own food cart and I own my own business. One, I want to be a hairstylist. One said they want to be an electrician. So their dreams were more limited to they also would say things like, I want to be independent and help my family. That was a theme also. But there wasn't for them, there wasn't a dream like maybe you would have in the United States, which was, well, hopefully one day I want to run a business, or, a large company, or be a senator or a president. I mean, they're limited, but what they're capable of doing and able to do and have done is get from this place where they were completely impoverished to horribly treated, to now being rehabilitated, part of a community, and now financially viable, where they can stand on their own 2 feet. And at some point, if they want to meet a young man and get married. And we met a young woman who had gone through that. And she said, my husband knows what happened to me, and he loves me and accepts me completely, which I thought, that is grace, and that is beautiful, and that's what you hope for. So that was the dream house, and then we spent time on both days at the training facility, and we saw how they were learning how to make food, or they were learning how to cut hair. They actually had a piece of newspaper and a pair of scissors, and they were snip, 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 and they would do it for like 100 times. And I got to video some of that, which was really cool. We saw the large room where they're learning how to be seamstresses, and they have 2 kinds of machines. One of them's for more of the kind of the industrial like complex, where they're doing kind of repeated patterns, and other ones were more intricate for kind of the smaller entities where they could make dresses or all the different kinds of clothes. And then there was the room where they were learning how to be electrical and electricians.
Okay, so I mean, this is a beautiful story. I want to get into kind of some more sensitive stuff, but I also want the audience, I mean, if you've got any questions to ask as well, to jump in. But I just want to know, I mean, you mentioned it's kind of like a village or a community, but you mentioned at the beginning that there's kind of an absence of sometimes electricity or any power, and then also for running water or food or anything else. I mean, are they self-sufficient? I mean, and there's kind of multiple questions here. And also, how did this all start? I mean, is there kind of a founder that saw what was happening with the trafficking, and he rescued, I don't know, rescued a girl, and then it kind of snowballed from there? And who funds this? And yeah, if you can maybe elaborate a bit more on that.
Yeah, so the founder's name is Ramesh. His last name, so first name spelled Ramesh. Last name is 𝗙𝗘𝗔𝗥𝗡, 𝗙𝗘𝗢𝗥𝗡. He has an amazing story, and we were fortunate one morning to hear that story, and we said at the end, there's got to be a book written on you and what happened to you, and he said, they've told me that, and I'm too busy, trying to grow this organization. But I cover a small part of that in my post. But the basic story is that he was born into a family that was not Christian, but he had a good early childhood, like a very stable home and all that. And then one day his mom had left, and he didn't know why she left, and there was a lot of pain. I think he was probably close to 10 years old, and so it was a difficult time for him. He had this burning desire to find her. Ultimately found her about 5 years or 6 years later. She had converted to Christianity, and for that reason, that's why she had left. She had always hoped that she would get reunited with him. And so when she found him, they did reunite. He was staying with her. Part of the mother's faith was supporting people in difficult situations where they were living in Nepal. And one day, a woman, this was in the 80s, had come to their home. She had been rescued from a brothel in India, and she had acquired HIV. And back in the early days when HIV was prevalent, it was very scary, right? No one knew how it was transmitted. And so there was a tremendous amount of fear. She brought this woman into her home and nursed her. She was a young woman who was dying of HIV. And she said to Ramesh's mother and him, "Please go to India and rescue my daughter." And she explained that she had had a daughter born in the brothel that she was in, and she had to leave her. And would they go back and find her? And as you can imagine, given the circumstances, that would be nearly impossible. But they tried. They went on this trek to India and found like the area, but sadly, they could never find the daughter. And so it stuck with Ramesh. And he spent the next 10 years kind of like growing as an adult, getting educated, and he could not shake this experience. And it was at that point he said, "I've got to do something. I will start small. I will tell others why I want to do this, but I want to honor the women of Nepal, create an environment where they are not so impoverished that they feel lured into, leaving their villages for jobs, and to rescue them and to educate them." And so it's been a step-by-step process. He has established relationships with organizations like North Point Community Church in Atlanta, but there's others that see what he's doing, and there's individuals that see what he's doing, and they are pouring in resources to support his organization and build it. And so one step at a time, we were told that about 12,000 women a year, young women, are kidnapped. They rescue about 1,000 of them. So they've gone from 0 18 years ago to 1,000 a year. And of course, their goal is to preclude everyone. And part of the way they're doing that is working on the demand side. So they've created an organization, a program called Man Up, Defend Her. Man Up, Defend Her. And what they're doing is they're going into these villages and saying, here's what it's like to be a man. Here's how you want to be as a father, as a husband. Here's how you treat the people in your community. And so if you learn that, then the young girls will feel more loved and valued, and they won't want to be, basically lured away to a better world where they can, be better off, when in truth the matter is they're being taken into an imprisoned situation.
Yeah, a wonderful story. So, I mean, admirable for the guy that set this all up. I mean, for what he's achieved. Individual. But you mentioned 1,000 girls are rescued just in the Nepal region.
Oh, yeah, in Nepal, right, with our Daughters International, right? Yeah, they're rescuing 1,000 a year.
If you can imagine, in a wider region or the whole country, I mean, it'll be phenomenal amounts of numbers. So, and if you look at this globally, then we're talking, tens of thousands per day.
Yeah, I'm learning more and more how horrible this human trafficking is, and my eyes are being opened, and once they're open, you can't close them, because it is so horrible.
Exactly. But did they? I mean, the girls. A question. How did you communicate?
So they put us connected to some individuals within their organization that were bilingual. So fortunately, we were able to have translators, interpreters who were able to help us make sure that we could speak to them, and it worked out well. And there was actually a couple of daughters who actually spoke English, so they were communicating for for their sisters.
Okay. Would English be something that they would learn there as well, or there wouldn't be a need where they live?
There wouldn't be a need, but I was actually quite shocked at how much English was written in business settings. So I asked that question to Ramesh, and he said, for businesses, showing English showed that you were prosperous. So there was a lot of signs in English, but for these individuals, there typically would not be a need. So it was not surprising that they didn't speak English, but some individuals had learned over time.
So it was kind of more survival in the way that learn a trade, learn how to be self-sufficient, start your own family, and be part of a community of like-minded people that can help and share and support one another.
Yeah, I would say that's a fair statement.
Right. So then, excuse maybe my naivety or just bring us up to speed with, typically with the trafficking, just kind of a level set on what it actually is. So girls are kidnapped from their family, or what happens? What's the definition of this?
Yeah. So, it's really a dark place. So there are some families where girls are sold by their families to a network. They're sold to an individual who passes them to another individual, who passes them to another individual, who that ultimately they end up in these brothels. And there's no chance of getting out unless somebody goes in there and rescues them. There are others who are quote unquote friends of the family who are anything but, who convey to these young girls that they want to help them find a job. They will treat them either way. There might be this woman who said, "Hey, listen, I want to help you. Let's go get you, a dress or something." And over a couple of stints, they might build some rapport, and then the next thing is, okay, I've got a job I want you to interview for. It might be some small job, but it'll pay, and you'll and the next thing they know, they're on a bus, they've been drugged, and they're 2 hours away to a location where they are trapped. In the case of the sometimes it's older men who are representative of potentially a husband. And so they will, the girl might be selling sugarcane on the side of the road, and it might cost 15 rupees. And they're like, "Oh, well, I'll buy a piece from you, but here's 20 rupees." And then a couple of days later, they come back and they, buy another piece, and they give them 25 rupees. And now, I think you're really attractive, and I'd like you to marry me, and let's go. And it happens, and they do, and then the next thing they know, they're crossing the border, and the border guard might say, "Who is this person?" And they'll say, "He's my husband." And and in their minds, they're married, and then the next thing they know, that person's gone, and they're in a world where they never expected to be. It's very dark.
Yeah, it reminds me of there's some movies, I forgot the name of the movie now, where the guy goes to rescue his daughter that's been kidnapped in one of these kind of things. I forgot the movie now, but it might come to me. But it's shocking in the way that, particularly when it's parents that are selling their daughters, are they selling them because they need the money?
That's typically what you hear. They're so impoverished that they need money, and they're going to die, and so this is an option, and I don't know if you call it accepted, but it's practice.
There's also, I don't know if the tradition still exists, maybe Paul can help here, that if a family had daughters and they got married, it was traditional to pay a dowry to the father, the husband's family, as part of the tradition that you're marrying my daughter, but we have to pay the family something. Does that still happen?
Yeah, it does happen.
And it happens in Nepal as well.
I mean, I can't see how that. I mean, I've heard stories in the past that daughters have seen the burden on their family, and they've taken their own life because they didn't want their parents to suffer the fact that when they get married, they have to pay for it.
Yeah,
I mean, how can you have something so crazy like this? I mean, I guess lots of stories within that period of being there, I mean, flooded your mind with, I mean, you're going through kind of a roller coaster of emotions.
For sure, we had a roller coaster. I didn't, like one of the first things we all wanted to know, the 8 of us, was how would these young women who were in the safe house react to us? And we would not have been surprised if they didn't want to even have anything to do with us, right? Because, some of them, it's been only a few weeks, but they had been told, where we were coming from and, that we were, what our intent was. And so some were more outgoing than others, but they would listen and they would read us and, and with a measured kind of response, they were warm to us. And then as we got to know them over the 2 full days and we spent a lot of time, then they became more open to, kind of asking questions and sharing stories.
Typically, they'd have to ask through a translator or something.
Correct. Yeah, through a translator.
And I mean, just going back to kind of the, I couldn't sell any of my kids, let alone my daughter. I mean, no matter.
It's incomprehensible, right? You just can't get your head around that.
Right, rather than have your own family suffering. But anyway, so typically what ages were they then? I mean, because, how long had they been trafficked for before they had managed to, how did they escape from it? Because you mentioned they went to, this foundation or organization went to rescue the girls. I mean, they knew where it was happening and they kidnapped them back or something, or did they rehabilitate them with their original family, or the family don't care about them because they sold them in the first place, or ones that were kidnapped from the family, which would be a different story. Now, glad to see their daughter again. Oh, yeah, I get there's such a mix there. One would be the same as another.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. So I'll share what I know, the little bit I know, and then, Paul and Linda can share what they know. But there is a mix. Some of these families did not know what happened. They were told that their daughters who were enticed by, like, say, a friend, had run away. And so in those instances where they were able to rescue them and they had loving families, they reacquainted them back with those families. In the instances where they didn't feel like the families would be safe, then they were not engaged with those families. Mm-hmm. So there's different circumstances. I don't know. I know that I went to the border and saw where they are, scouring for young women who've been taken. I don't know how long they'd been taken, so what their circumstances were. Maybe they caught them before they actually anything really horrible happened, and so maybe the stint in the center is more about training. But some of them, they literally go into these brothels and they rescue them. So their circumstances are difficult. One young woman we knew, she had been, basically forced into the sex trade for over a year, and she was going from one building to another, and she was able to escape and found somebody who, protected her and got her to this organization. So everyone has a unique and different story, and so that's why I think they're set up to treat them basically based on how much trauma they've been through, and all of it's horrible, but some is worse than others.
But it's shocking to know, but does the governments or any authorities do anything to help?
Yeah, well, good question. Our Daughters International collaborates with the Nepalese government. So that's why when these women who are at the border, who are young ladies, stop these vehicles, they stop because they know that they have the support of the Nepalese government behind them. So they are working in conjunction with the Nepalese government. And so it is good to see that that's going on.
But typically, I mean, jump in and ask questions, anyone in the audience, but typically from what age are they being kidnapped from?
Oh, yeah. The young women that we saw, I think I saw as young as 14 and maybe as old as 26.
12 also, even 12, 13.
Yeah, could even be younger. And these were rescued, so they may have been captured at, 2 or 3 years younger than that.
Yeah, I have a question, Pete. I'm wondering what you think is, long-term necessary, like what is missing in those parts of the world, or specifically in that part of the world? Like, what is missing? Like, what is needed for humans in general, for humans in those conditions to change their circumstances and to not feel like under so much pressure anymore to sell their own children, if you know what I mean?
No, it's a really important question to ask. I think that is the kind of the step that our Daughters International is forming with this idea of man up, defend her, which is, hey, let's and by the way, this is mostly a Buddhist and Hindu based country. So Christianity is really small. You can't promote Christianity, but you can be Christian. So that's a good thing. So the idea of the man up, defend her is like, what does Christianity say about what it means to be a man, to be a father, to be a husband, to be a brother? And so if they can teach those individuals one by one, okay, this is what Jesus demands, then if they start to change, then they can change their homes, their families, and then start to change their community. So I think that's a huge part of it, right? It's like, let's make sure we treat every human being with the dignity that that we learn as Christians. So at this point, they don't believe that, and I don't know, Paul, if you can shed some light on that, that would be helpful.
Yeah. See, like in India, there's one sect called 𝗕𝗘𝗢𝗨𝗧. You heard of it, 𝗕𝗘𝗢𝗨 sect. So what happens here is, if they have kids, they sell off their kids. It's a religious thing for them. So there is such sects in India, but very few people, they have very few people following such caste. So again, different people, see, in cities, normal people, all would be normal. Everything is normal here. But in villages, some tribal areas, there would be such sects. It's not in South India. There are such sects in, I think, in North India, or even in some center part of India. So there are such sects. So they do this sort of thing. One is that. Second is what do you call the guys? The guys, they will fool the innocent girls, and then it's just like what do you call? They will drug them and take them for work. So the work is a bad work. So that's it. Once when they are trapped in that, then there is politicians involved and everything involved, and they can't come out. So no normal person will go and fight for them, because this is a mafia, so they will just stab you. If you come in between, you are going to be stabbed. So then police is corrupt. There are police corruption, not only in India, even in Nepal also. Nepal, it will be 100 times worse. We are not knowing, So these are the real things which are happening. And these people, from there, when they come, might be the guys telling them lies. They are specialist guys, they tell them lies. And then they bring here and then they sell it off. So no one will know. And then there will be a team of people. And see, the laws are not very strict here, which means the criminals, such sort of criminals, they at the max will get 7 years prison, 8-10 years prison. Yeah. But then they can be bailed off. They can, corruption, everything is possible. They can just come out. So these are the factors which I think, we have to point out. And even in India, see, if anyone does a crime, what they do is they put a what you call a sort of mask on their face. So who the criminal is, no one knows. The criminal is able to hide his identity. So that's another problem. So it's good for these criminals, no? Right? So these are the things which I know. Like there might be many more things. And earlier it was too much. Now I think it's becoming better and better. Like these sort of things are reducing, but I don't know. Still, we don't know. We don't know. That's the thing.
Thanks, Paul. It's
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah, it's quite shocking, isn't it? I mean, the corruption goes right to the top. So it doesn't matter what you do on a local level. The perpetrators of this will get away with it, and they'll carry on doing it another day. Whereas the victim, which are the girls and the families, they have to live with that. I mean, it must be difficult growing up as a girl, knowing that you're born into a family, and then you're thinking that at any point between my youth, I could be kidnapped.
Yeah. And one more thing is there's like one more thing in India, especially in India or Nepal also, for them especially. So if a girl is kidnapped and someone does something on her, they will try to hide that information because no other guy will marry that girl. Understand? So that is the advantage these criminals have. So because it will be a culture of shame, and then the girl will commit suicide and her father will also commit suicide because of the shame that she has brought shame to the family. That's how they think, that's the this happens mostly in North India and all, but in some educated states of India, it's very reverse. You do such nonsense, immediately paper, and you will be gone. You can't do that sort of crime in many parts of India, but there are such places like that, North India. It's a shame, so they will hide that info. So because then no suitable guy will come and marry that girl. That's the other way. This is the other reason it spreads. So it's hidden. Many things will be hidden, and no one will know. That's because it will be a shame. No one will marry that girl. No? That's the other thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, and just to weigh in on that, Paul, and thank you for that, because that's really important. Like I said, this young woman who was 24 years old, so the age of my twin daughters. So it really hit home. She had told about the story how the friend of the family, who's helping her get a job, who drugged her, and she was basically 15 years old and was forced to have sex for a year before she escaped. She's part of this Christian group, called Our Daughters International, and rehabilitated, now working for the organization. And at 22, met a young man, and I saw a picture of him, and she said, he knows my story, and he's still chosen me, and that's real redemption and real grace. And that's amazing, right? Because what you said, Paul, is 100% right. It's if this young woman who had was so horribly treated had anything to do with what happened to her. And thankfully, she now understands that she's loved regardless, and so her husband loves her the same, and and the organization she's with does as well. So she can now, and by the way, she was part of the untouchable caste. So in her world, she was untouchable, right? But in her Christian world, she knows that's not true. So it is an incredible story.
Yeah. So moving on, I mean, with the girls, I mean, they've been kind of rehabilitated in a way that they've been taken out or kidnapped out. I mean, it seems crazy how they got to kidnap the girls out of being in the sex trade and stuff. So they've now rehabilitated them, or as best as possible, in the communities now, and given them kind of help them with the trade and whatever, and they've gone on to bigger and better things. So are people keeping kind of, monitoring this to see where they go next and how their life is and their journey is developing? And are they always welcome back in the community, or are they there for a certain period and then you've got to find your own way, or could you stay there longer? And I mean, how does it work? I mean, they're not going to kick girls out, I guess, if they don't find a partner or they don't find a family or somewhere to go. They don't say, well, you're on your own, you've been here for X years or whatever, like, get on with it. Or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, from everything I can see, the organization is established to allow for as much time as it takes, and they're part of a community. We drove by on one of our shuttle runs from one place to the next, this little food kiosk, and the woman who was running it saw us and waved, and we waved back, and she ultimately came, and for one day she came into the safety house area, and she was basically providing food for all of us. So they keep this rapport. They are a tightly knit group of individuals, and my sense is, at any one point in time, they would do whatever they needed to help them. I think once you're a daughter, you're always a daughter. So yeah, that's the beautiful part of it.
Yeah. Did it ever, being there and seeing it, and kind of the emotions and everything, and knowing what they've gone through, and then knowing kind of what you've got back home, and in comparison to your own daughters, and how they've lived a completely different life because they're in a different country, in different situation and everything else. Do you feel at any point that you want to kind of adopt one of the daughters and give her a better life?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable emotion. I don't know that I got to the point where adopt, but certainly want to do whatever I can. And that may mean everything from just monetary support, which I am starting to do, but also to do things like this, right, where I'm sharing my story and building awareness about this organization so other people can lend either their talents or their resources to get involved, because they are definitely open-handed about, like, we'll take resources from those who want to be part of this. And for me, one of the things I've talked about, and we'll see how that can happen, is, can I help them with any branding or marketing? They seem to be doing a great job, but maybe there's some things I can do. But the other thing I've done is I've told my story to others already. I know a woman who is now a professor. She works for the University of North Texas. She was actually my coach when I did my TEDx talk. We stayed connected for the last 6 years. And now she knows about programs at the University of North Texas where they could potentially work with our Daughters International. And so she's reaching out to them and saying, hey, can we collaborate on a way for us to establish these long-term relationships? So to me, that's an amazing example where I just tell a little bit and somebody else gets involved, and then they start to pour resources in. And so I'm mostly a conduit versus anything else.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right in saying it's about bringing awareness. And when you actually go, you live with these memories forever, right? I remember, just digressing a little bit, in 1989, I went to Romania on a relief aid mission to the orphanages in the middle of nowhere. And we drove there from the UK, and we went through the Transylvanian mountains, and we went to a place called 𝗙𝗘𝗔𝗥𝗡 in the middle of nowhere. And it was the time where Ceausescu had just been, ousted. And yeah, it was the stories that you see and the experience and the whole journey lives with you forever. And I can relate to your story as well, because it gives me flashbacks of kind of my story and how I felt. And yeah, it's easy to read the news and watch something on TV, and then 5 minutes later you're watching your favorite movie on TV and you've completely forgotten about it. But when you're actually there and you're living it and you're feeling it and you're smelling it and breathing it and part of it, right? Although not the atrocity itself, but the stories and the ambience and everything there, then you become part of that feeling, and that never escapes you. That's always with you. And yeah, I mean, for what you're doing and bringing awareness, I mean, I know you're writing another book with us, but you could write yet another book on this story alone. And to me, it's captivating. And I mean, when you put the post out on LinkedIn and you shared about kind of the high level intro into what it was, it's not until we have you on the show and we start to dig deeper and you bring out more, which is impossible to write it all in one little post. But yeah, I'm so fascinated with these stories that, yeah, I want more people to engage in these. And there's many, many more stories that of other things like this that are happening on a daily basis, that it's about exactly what you said. And just to reiterate that, it's bringing an awareness, because most people just plod through their life completely unaware of this. And if they're not part of it, or it doesn't affect them or their family, then it's kind of the so what. And you've brought to life something that is very, very meaningful, but touches on so many people. And it's a magical story that you're telling. I mean, even though of the atrocities of it, it's magical in the essence of highlighting something that is happening every day that we take no notice of. And that's the worrying thing.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. And, I feel like for me personally with my faith, I get these nudges, go act on this, go do that. And when I do follow those, that's when the real richness comes through. And this was certainly something where I kind of got on the website and saw the opportunity and said, absolutely, I think this is something I should do. Raised my hand, told my story, why I thought I should be part of it, and was fortunate enough to get picked to be part of the team. And now I feel responsibility to share the story. And that I think if Ramesh asked us to do one thing, it would be that: tell the world about ODI and get people to support us. He's got so many amazing ideas. One of the things I mentioned, this idea, is that I hope there will be a book and ultimately a movie written about him and how he came about starting this organization. He's an amazing person, just so charismatic and such a visionary. And I have a great relationship with an international best-selling author, a woman named Dawn Bates, who she writes about things that matter at a human level. And I told her about him and this, and we haven't spoken yet face to face, but one of the things I would hope is that somehow she could get involved and help him write this story. I know if she were able to do that, it would be something that everyone would absolutely want to read, and that would even do more. And so that's what we have to do. We have to each do our part. No, and you're doing your part by having me on this show. So thank you for that.
No, you're more than welcome. I mean, just for me personally, I wanted to hear the story. But I mean, this will go out to the wider audience, and then they can listen to it as well. I mean, I think, what you've shared today is admirable. And yeah, I take my hat off to you. And this is something amazing, and not many people get the opportunity to go and do something like this, to have that. So we'll share basically all the links and everything that people can contact you. And I mean, if you can share links about how people can look at the village or the community, the organization, and what they do, and if they can follow or donate or whatever it may be, then provide those links as well. And
yeah, absolutely.
The other thing is, now you've done this, do you know what's coming next? Is there another trip planned for next year?
Not yet. This is my fourth one. So 15, 16, 19, and now 23. So, as you can imagine, you really have to gear up for something like this mentally, emotionally, financially. So, cause I'm setting aside time, that I should or could be working, not should be, but could be working. So, I don't know what's next, but, when I'm felt led, I will definitely raise my hand and go in it with 100%, commitment.
Yeah. Okay. On that note, Pete, you've been our 121st guest, right? You were our 12th guest. So there's a whole story about you. and now the 112th, so 121st. So excellent. Now, have you got any questions from the audience just before we wrap up? Anything else? Right. Okay. So, Pete, any closing words that you want to leave us with?
I guess I would just leave it with, first off, thank you for this great opportunity to share the story. If you're a person of faith, I would definitely, pray about things like this, and, where you're led, do it. I know in every one of these examples where I've raised my hand and gone, I've gotten so much more out of it than I possibly have given. And so this is an opportunity for personal growth. I built bonds with individuals who've gone on these trips with me, and that's been life-changing for me. And I've had these amazing people now in my life. But, just one, we're called to be conduits, right? We're, just raise the awareness one level, and somebody gets involved and huge things can happen. So don't feel like you have to do it all on your own. You're just playing a small part in a bigger plan. And so if you're willing to play that part, you'll get a lot out of it. And you'll create an opportunity for perhaps someone else or some other organization to get involved, and that will make a huge difference. So thank you on that note, and I'm so glad I got to participate today.
We were practicing cutting.
Seizures, how to cut the seizures.
Okay, so how long have they been in training?
Then, what do you mean?
Wow, that was another featured business brought to you by Visibility Impact. If you'd like to be our next featured guest or learn how James Mofat can help you leverage on the art and power of interactive storytelling for your business, reach out and schedule a call now.